She dared to mock him, thinking he was just another black recruit, but what he did next shook the entire base. What kind of power does a person hold when they can destroy someone's future with just one laugh? That was the question echoing through the cold morning air as recruit Jordan Miles stood in the military yard, surrounded by officers who never believed he could survive a single week, and their eyes were already on him like he was a joke they planned to enjoy again today. General Helena Graves walked toward the broken, armored vehicle with the confidence of a queen and the cruelty of someone who loved watching people fail, and her boots crushed the gravel like she was stepping on anything that threatened her authority. Captain Reed smirked at Jordan the moment Helena arrived, because he knew she hated recruits like Jordan, quiet black men who didn't break easily and didn't react to insults, and that made her want to humiliate him even more. Officer Taylor stood near the tool station, her arms crossed, noticing how Helena's eyes narrowed at Jordan the same way she looked at rust on her machines, something unworthy and easily scraped away. The recruits whispered as Jordan stepped forward, trying to hide how tired he was from last night's training, but they still laughed because that was the rule of the yard. Laugh at the black recruit before the officers do it for you. The engine of the military vehicle hissed and coughed, smoke rising like a warning, and Helena pointed at it with a grin that held no warmth. Then she said the line that froze the entire yard, "Fix this engine, and I'll marry you myself." She said it not as a challenge, but as a punishment, as if comparing herself to him was the biggest insult. The recruits burst into laughter. Captain Reed doubled over, and even some officers covered their mouths to hide their grins, but Jordan kept his face steady because he had been laughed at by life long before any of them existed. Helena walked closer, her eyes drilling into him, her voice sharp as a blade as she asked if he even knew the difference between a wrench and a hammer, or if his kind only knew how to break things instead of fixing them. Officer Taylor flinched at the racism in the general's tone, but she was outranked and silent, watching Jordan carefully because she saw something none of them did, a spark behind his calm eyes that felt like quiet power. Jordan stepped toward the engine while the yard watched, and for a moment the laughter stopped, replaced by a cruel silence waiting for him to fail. Captain Reed whispered that Jordan should just quit before embarrassing himself again, but Jordan ignored him, remembering the nights he fixed old broken machines in his uncle's garage just to keep the lights on. Helena crossed her arms, confident she would destroy him like all the others she mocked in the past, but she didn't know the truth. Jordan touched the engine once and instantly understood the problem, because machines always made more sense than people did. The yard leaned in. Helena smirked, Reed whispered insults, Taylor prayed silently, and Jordan Miles breathed deeply because this moment was bigger than humiliation. This was the moment his life would change forever. Before he bent down to open the panel, he lifted his head and whispered quietly, "I can fix it." And the yard went silent because they knew something was about to happen. Subscribe for Chapter 2. The yard froze when Jordan whispered those words, and the silence was so sharp, it felt like the air stopped moving as every recruit, officer, and even General Helena Graves stared at him like he had just challenged a storm. Captain Reed let out a loud scoff and stepped closer, saying Jordan should stop pretending to be smart because people like him only talk big before they fail. But Jordan ignored him completely and knelt beside the armored vehicle while the cold morning wind brushed against his face like a reminder of how many times life tried to break him and failed. Helena raised an eyebrow, amused and irritated, because Jordan's calm made her feel like she wasn't in control, and she absolutely hated when recruits didn't tremble at her voice, so she repeated her mockery louder, telling the entire yard to hear it clearly, "Fix this engine, and I'll marry you myself." Recruits burst into laughter again, some even wiping tears, but Officer Taylor watched Jordan carefully and noticed his hands didn't shake, not even a little, as he opened the panel with the careful precision of someone who didn't just know engines, but understood them like they were old friends. When the first screw came out smoothly, Helena's smirk tightened because she expected fumbling, fear, or failure, not confidence, but Jordan stayed focused like nothing existed except gears and wires. Captain Reed stepped beside Helena and whispered that Jordan was just pretending, that he would embarrass himself soon, and Helena nodded with a cold smile because she believed the same thing and was already preparing another public humiliation. Jordan leaned forward as smoke drifted from the engine, and the moment he saw the wiring, he immediately knew the issue: a misaligned fuel regulator and blocked airflow, something simple but deadly for a vehicle under pressure. Officer Taylor noticed the way Jordan's eyes sharpened and whispered softly, "He found it." But Reed overheard and snapped at her, accusing her of choosing sides, while Helena silenced them both with a hand because she wanted to hear Jordan fail on his own without any noise to distract from his downfall. Jordan picked up a small tool and adjusted one component, then another, his movements quick and sure, and the recruits slowly stopped laughing as they realized he wasn't guessing. He wasn't panicking, he wasn't lost, he was fixing it. Helena's jaw tightened, Reed's face reddened. Taylor looked hopeful. Jordan closed the panel gently and stood up without saying a word, and the yard's silence grew so heavy it felt like sound was afraid to come back. Helena stepped forward, her voice sharp as thunder, asking him if he was done playing mechanic, but Jordan simply nodded and said, "Try it." The yard collectively inhaled as Helena ordered Reed to start the engine, and Reed climbed into the vehicle, still smirking, expecting smoke or noise or failure. But when he turned the key, the armored engine roared back to life, cleaner than it had in months. The sound deep and powerful, like a victory Jordan earned long before anyone recognized it. Gasps filled the yard as recruits looked at one another, shocked, while Taylor's eyes widened with pride, and Helena's face froze as she stared at Jordan with something she had never used before: respect mixed with fear. Captain Reed stumbled out of the vehicle speechless, unable to hide how wrong he was, and Helena had no words because her joke had turned into truth, and now every officer and every recruit was looking at her, waiting for her to address her own challenge. Jordan stood there quietly, his posture humble, his hands steady, his expression calm as ever, but inside he felt something he hadn't felt in years, a rising fire telling him his life was about to change, and the entire yard knew it too. Subscribe for Chapter 3. The yard erupted into stunned whispers as the engine kept roaring smoothly, and Jordan stood in the same calm posture, while every recruit and officer waited for General Helena Graves to respond to the challenge she herself had thrown moments earlier. Helena's cold eyes locked onto Jordan with a mixture of irritation and disbelief, because no recruit, especially not one from his background, had ever turned her mockery into a victory that made her look foolish in front of her own soldiers. Captain Reed rushed forward, shouting that it must have been luck or a fluke, trying desperately to twist the moment so Jordan wouldn't get credit. But his voice cracked when the engine purred again, exposing him as the liar he always was. Officer Taylor stepped between Jordan and Reed, her voice steady as she told Reed to step back because Jordan didn't need to defend himself. The machine already spoke the truth, and the recruits saw Reed's face turn red as he realized the support for Jordan was growing. Helena finally raised a hand and silenced the entire yard instantly, her boots striking the ground as she walked toward Jordan with slow, deliberate steps that made the air heavier with each one. And when she stopped inches from him, the recruits held their breath. She stared at him like she was studying a dangerous weapon she hadn't expected to exist, and she demanded he explain exactly what he did, expecting him to stumble or fail to describe it. But Jordan calmly explained the misaligned regulator, the airflow blockage, and the sequence he corrected, his voice steady, humble, and precise, and the recruits blinked in shock because he didn't speak like a low-ranked trainee, he spoke like an expert. Helena's jaw tightened. Reed muttered racist insults under his breath. Taylor nodded proudly. Jordan finished speaking, and the yard fell quiet again as Helena tried to find something, anything, to use to humiliate him, but nothing came out. Instead, she stepped back, her rigid posture cracking just enough to reveal something she never showed: weakness. Reed saw her hesitation and panicked, stepping forward to regain control by shouting that Jordan must have tampered with the engine earlier or cheated somehow. But the recruits groaned because even they knew how pathetic that sounded, and Taylor snapped at Reed, asking why he couldn't admit the boy was talented. Helena barked at them both to stand down, but her voice didn't carry the same confidence it had minutes earlier, because the yard had seen something shift. Power was moving, respect was changing, and Jordan was at the center of it, whether he wanted to be or not. Jordan remained silent, choosing dignity over celebration, and that silence unsettled Helena even more because she thrived on breaking people, but he didn't break. Instead, he looked at her with steady respect, not fear, which made her feel like he was judging her without words. Finally, Helena declared the test over and ordered everyone back to formation, but no one moved, not until she looked at Jordan again and said quietly yet sharply, "You stay where you are." Jordan's heart thumped once hard, but his expression didn't change. Taylor's hand instinctively twitched as if she wanted to step closer to him. He smirked because he thought Helena was finally going to crush him. The entire yard froze again, waiting. Helena stepped right in front of Jordan, leaned in slightly and said, "You think fixing one engine makes you special? I will break you before this week ends." Jordan didn't answer, he didn't flinch, and Helena hated that more than failure itself. Before turning away, she added with a venomous smirk, "And don't forget, according to my own words, I owe you a marriage proposal." Reed cackled. The recruits whispered. Taylor's eyes widened. Jordan's face stayed calm, but inside he felt a storm building because he knew Helena would come after him harder than ever now. And the real battle was only beginning. Subscribe for Chapter 4. She turned away with that venomous smirk still on her lips, and Jordan stood silently where she left him, knowing the general would come back harder than ever, because a woman like Helena Graves didn't tolerate being embarrassed in front of her soldiers. But what she didn't expect was how quickly the truth unraveled around her when the higher-ranking officers arrived on base after hearing about the engine incident. And suddenly, the entire command wanted to know how a mere recruit had repaired a machine their own specialists had failed to fix for weeks, leaving Helena looking like a leader who mocked a soldier who could outperform her best engineers. Captain Reed tried to jump in and twist the story, shouting that Jordan cheated or tampered with it earlier, but the officers shut him down instantly because Taylor stepped forward with courage, stating clearly that she watched Jordan fix the engine with his bare hands and that Reed and Helena had humiliated him before he even knew what was happening. And the officers' eyes narrowed at Helena as they asked why she made that marriage mockery in the first place, why she publicly ridiculed a recruit, and why her own staff was accusing a trainee without evidence. Helena snapped that it was just a figure of speech, but the officers didn't let her off so easily, pointing out that her figure of speech had backfired because Jordan had done exactly what she dared him to do, and now every recruit was repeating her own words across the base. Jordan stood quietly through the chaos, humble as always, even when one of the senior engineers shook his hand in front of everyone and said he'd never seen a recruit solve a mechanical failure that quickly, and Helena's face went pale because she realized she wasn't just fighting a trainee, she was fighting talent. Reed grew desperate, trying to shove Jordan and provoke him into reacting, but Jordan didn't move, didn't blink, and his calmness exposed Reed's hatred for what it was, pure insecurity. The officers pushed Reed back, warning him that any further harassment toward Jordan would be recorded and reported, and Helena suddenly felt the ground shift beneath her authority because all morning she'd been unstoppable, but now she was cornered. Finally, the senior officer asked Jordan if he had anything to say, and Jordan simply replied that he didn't want trouble, he didn't want revenge, he only wanted respect and the chance to serve without being mocked for where he came from, and that simple sentence hit the yard harder than any order Helena had ever given. Silence filled the field, and for the first time Helena's eyes softened, not out of kindness, but out of realization that she had gone too far. She stepped toward Jordan slowly, the soldiers watching breathlessly, and she said the words no one believed they'd ever hear from her. "You fixed the impossible. You won the bet I never intended to be real, and for that I owe you an apology." The yard shook with shock. Reed froze in disbelief. Taylor smiled with pride, and Helena, the ruthless general, lowered her voice and added, "I don't take back the challenge, you met it. And I will honor my word, not the marriage part, but the respect part." She saluted him, a full salute to trainee. Jordan's heart pounded, his throat tightened because she wasn't mocking him now, she was acknowledging him in front of the entire base. The recruits erupted into applause. Reed stormed off angrily. Taylor whispered, "Well done, Jordan, you just changed everything." And as the officers dismissed the formation, Helena stopped Jordan one last time and said quietly, "You're going to have a future in this military. I see that now, don't waste it." Jordan nodded respectfully, and as he walked across the training yard, recruits tapped his shoulder with admiration. Taylor walked beside him proudly, and even Helena watched him with a new, reluctant respect. The story ended not with revenge, but with dignity, justice, and the quiet strength of a young black recruit who proved talent is louder than hate. And if you felt even a little inspired by Jordan's journey, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe because more powerful stories are coming.